Before we start this video, a large thank you to Squirtbirth, very interesting name, Elgara, Daniel, Madlad289, you, Inqueo, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, my friend, and Lonely Towel, also a very interesting name. And a special thank you to Mike Harden Games for their immense support of this channel this month on Patreon. Okay guys, today we're going to make our archery system, or at least begin it, and as you can see here, I have made a bow weapon, and I have a icon dropped in, have it named, and I have just the prefab of the weapon model in my hand. It's just like making any other weapon we've done before, and I've made an Animator overrider controller, called it bow. The first thing we do is add a weapon type. So we don't have one for bow, so let's go ahead and open up our enums script, and right here where it says weapon type, we're just going to put a comma here and say bow. And we're going to save that and go back to the bow and assign that weapon type. And I'm going to take a sip of tea. Okay, so next, let's actually go over here now. I'm just checking something with the sword. Just give me a second. All right, so let's go to the bow and let's assign the bow weapon type. And we actually want to then go over and let's go into the game here and see how it looks. Alright, so that's cool. You're going to see now, though, if I actually try to two-hand it, we get an error. That's because there's no hand IK on the weapon. And I don't want to put hand IK targets on every weapon, so if you don't want to include them on some, all you can do is just say, if right-hand target does not equal null, this is under set hand IK for weapon, under the character animator manager script, and drop that in here, and then make another check for the left-hand IK target. So this basically just means if our weapon does not have hand IK target set up, then we're just going to skip that process. I'm not going to set it up for the bow right now. And this looks cool, but that's not how you're supposed to hold a bow. So let's actually swap out our animations now. I believe those are the straight sword animations. So I'm going to go to the bow animator overrider controller, and just like we did before, all my locomotion motions that I want to use with the bow, I'm going to drag in here. So if you have a two-handed animations for your bow, just drag them in here. If you don't have them all, you can use placeholders. Don't worry about it, because this video will still teach you the functionality, and we'll still get to the point where you can fire it and aim it and such. But you know, I'm using my own blend tree for the bow running around. So when I two-hand the bow, I have my own animations for running forward, backwards, left and right, and then forward, left, forward, right, backward, left, and backward, right. Again, if you don't have the animations, like I said, placeholders are fine. Don't worry. We'll still get to the part where we actually fire and shoot the bow. I'm just going to set this up though, because this is a vital important part to remaking the archery system as is in Dark Souls, because in Dark Souls, you have your own locomotion blend tree with the bow, and you actually can aim and walk while aiming the bow as well. So we're going to set that up as well. So after that is all done, okay, now if we go in the blend tree here, we're actually going to, I made a mistake here in a previous video. Where it says two-handed walk backwards left, this should actually be two-handed walk forward. So it should actually be the forward left. That was just right there, and again, that might have looked bad if you had that in your blend tree, so I just want to correct that before we moved on. That's like the base class of all locomotion animations, or the base animation set, rather. Okay, now that's done, if I go into the game here now, I'm going to two-hand the bow and see how that looks. So by two-handed, you can see it's looking good, but we actually got to fix the adjustment of the bow. So like we did before, let's go to our weapon pivot, and we change the rotation of that. You want to get the hand holding the bow, and if you can, the other hand just on the bowstring. I believe that's how Souls does it. So I'm going to get that as close as I can, and then I'll be right back. Remember to assign your transform here on the weapon pivot. Okay, that looks good. So now we can run around and we're holding the bow and it looks natural. However, we still want to be able to actually aim the bow. So this is a great place to start. We have our locomotion set up. So now let's actually get into the process of being able to aim the bow in our hands. So what we want to do is create a parameter in our animator. We're going to call that isAiming. This will inform our animator when to switch to the aiming animations and when to switch back to regular locomotion. Then on the base layer, that's important, go up here and create a new blend tree. And you can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it two-handed aiming. So this being the future, we can use this for crossbows as well, or any kind of object that you actually aim on a sight with. Now on the blend tree, let's make it 2D freeform directional. And then we want to make the parameters horizontal by vertical, just like every other blend tree we ever made. And again, since we're only walking, we only need 9 slots in this one, because what we want is an idle, which is just where you're stationary and aiming. And then you want to be able to move forward, backward, left, and right. And then forward left, forward right, and backward left, and backward right. So again, if you don't have these animations or you can't get them made, you can just use placeholders for now. That is fine. But I'm going to drop in my idle, which is just the aim. So if we're aiming and not moving, we're just displaying a regular aiming animation. And then if we're walking forward and aiming, we're displaying the walking forward and aiming animation. And you can get where this is going. I'll just walk through the values here for people who don't know what they are. But the second value, the position Y, is basically our vertical input, and that is how much we're tilting the left stick forward. So the Y input is moving forward and backward, and the X input is moving left and right. So a positive input value on the Y input will move us forward, whereas a negative value will move us backwards. And a positive value on the X input will move us right, and a negative value will move us left. So for forward and left, we're going to want a negative 0.5 in the X value, and then a positive 5 on the Y value. So that's a positive movement on the left stick, and then we're also moving the left stick to the left. So I'm just going to fast forward now after I've placed all these in, and then I'll let you look at it on the screen for a bit, so you can actually gauge how to set this up the same as I did. Okay, so let's make a transition from the two-handed locomotion to the two-handed aiming. And we're going to make a condition. The condition will be is aiming. We're going to set that to false. To true, sorry. And we're going to set the has exit time to false. And then we're going to make a condition to go back to locomotion. We're going to change is aiming to false. And we're going to untick has exit time. So this happens instantly. All right, that looks good. So now we actually have everything set up. We need to actually make our functionality now to enable the character to aim the bow. So over here in the player combat manager, as you can see, we only have one LB action right now. It's handle block. So let's make some logic in this function. We're going to say if we are two-handing the weapon, so if the player manager dot is two-handing weapon, we're going to say if player inventory manager dot, is it current right weapon? No, I think it's just right weapon. Yes, getting my projects mixed up. Dot right weapon is equal to, if our player inventory manager dot right weapon dot weapon type is equal to weapon type dot bow, then we're going to want to perform an aiming action. So aim the bow. Now, while we're here, we're actually going to make it so we can cast spells with our offhand too. So we're going to add some functionality for that as well. And we're going to obviously restore our ability to block. So we're going to say else, if we're not two-handing our weapon, then we must just be one-handing our right-handed weapon and our left-handed weapon. So we're going to say if player inventory manager dot left weapon dot weapon type is equal to weapon type dot, let's do our melee weapons first. So we'll say shield, then essentially we can copy that again, and I believe the only other weapon type we have set up right now is the straight sword. So I'm just going to say dot straight sword. If it's any of these weapons, we want to just do a blocking action as per usual. So I'll open up some brackets down here again and just copy the perform LB block action and then paste it in here, like so. Okay, so we have that, and now let's actually add the ability to cast magic in the offhand, which is obviously a very important part of the Soul series. If you're holding your caster, weaponing your offhand, you want to cast a spell with it, so you can melee with your right hand and offhand cast spells. So we're going to say if, else if, player inventory manager dot left weapon dot weapon type is equal to faith caster, or, and I believe we only have pyromancy caster in right now, because we have a faith spell and a pyromancy spell, so we'll change that one to pyromancy caster. And then if this is the logic, we just want to actually attempt to cast a spell. And we have our other function named incorrectly, I do believe. Well, it was correct for what we had it. Right now it's called perform RB magic action. So let's just rename this to perform magic action, because we're going to make it basically choose the action in the left or right hand, depending on if you're holding a left or right hand item. So let's just add a bool for is left-handed. And let me take a quick look at this. Okay, so over here in the play target animation, let's make another bool for mirrored animation. And we're going to initialize that at false. And this basically will just mirror the animation you're playing. So if the animation displays a right-handed animation, it'll split it and it'll play it from your left hand instead. It's a very handy tool. I'm going to show you how to set it up. We're going to say animator.setBool is mirrored is equal to the is mirrored bool. So by default, it's always false. That's good. Now we actually have to set this up in the animator too. So let's make a parameter for is mirrored. Looking good so far. Okay. And then let's go to the override. We want to disable is mirrored every time we come back to the empty state. So what we're going to do is actually just make a public string for is mirrored bool. And again, it's just called is mirrored. And then we'll make a string is mirrored, not a bool. And then we're going to make a bool for is mirrored status. And we're going to initialize that at false. It is always false. When we come back, we are resetting it to false. So then we'll say animator.setBool is mirrored bool to the is mirrored status. Let's hop over to the script spell item. And on attempt to cast spell, we're going to add a bool for is left-handed. Let's copy that, and I think we're going to need it on successfully cast spell too. I might change this because we can handle this one of two ways. But for now, we're going to put that there. Okay, so next let's actually go and edit all the spell scripts and go back to the player combat manager and just pass is left-handed in both of these. There we go, under perform magic action. Okay. Now, under the spell item script, let's actually just erase is left-handed from successfully cast spell for now. I'm going to think more on that after we finish the attempt cast spell. So let's add our bool is left-handed to the attempt cast spell across, I believe it is the healing spell and the projectile spell scripts. Just going to copy that, put a comma there. That's good. So why are we doing this? Well, right now the instantiated effects only instantiate in the right hand. And if we're casting it from our left hand, we obviously want the effects to instantiate in our left hand. So we're going to change that right now. The healing spell, this part's fine because the warm-up actually instantiates under you. It's just like a ring that spawns under you. But the play target animation, what we're going to do is we're going to say true, false, so we cannot rotate. And then we're going to say is left-handed at the end. That means if we are using left hand, we're going to mirror the animation, which will make the animation play from our left hand instead of right hand. So we're going to do the same thing over here in the projectile spell. This looks good. But we're actually going to make an if statement here. So if is left-handed, let's do some logic. Else we're using right hand, let's do some other logic. Because you can see here right now, we're actually instantiating a fireball in our hand. We want to do that in the correct hand. So we're going to basically say left hand slot if we're left-handed. And we're also going to add in the false. So we can't rotate here. And then we're going to say is left-handed for mirroring the animation. And we can also just do that down here too to keep the naming conventions the same, because if it is right-handed, that will be false anyway. Okay, that looks good. Now, we are actually going to need to add the bool for successfully cast spell. I just realized, so let's add that there now in the base class. Let's go back to the projectile and the healing spell and add a bool for success, or is using left hand on both. And I will show you why momentarily. So let's put that here, is left-handed. And let's make another bool here for is left-handed. All right. Now, when we successfully cast a spell, we're actually instantiating a live prefab of the spell usually. So we're going to do something similar. Over here on the projectile spell, we're going to say if is left-handed, and then we're going to say else is right-handed. In the future, for a polish element, we won't do it in this video, we're actually going to instantiate the spell on a location on the caster item. So like on a staff, it will instantiate on the top of the staff. On the Pyromancy Flame, it'll still instantiate in your hand. On a charm or like a faith caster, it will instantiate, actually on the caster object itself. This will make the spell look a little bit more neat, but we're not going to do it right now because that is a polish element. It's very easy to do if you want to set it up yourself. I'm just going to go on and actually finish the range system after we finish allowing to cast from our left hand with magic. So, okay, what are we doing? Well, we're instantiating a spell effect, and Unity doesn't want to let us use this variable, even though we instantiate it either way. So I think we're actually going to have to copy the logic twice. Let me just try something. If I put this above here, I don't think it's going to work, but we'll try it. No, because then we can't get it in the if statement. Okay, so let's erase that. And we're actually just going to copy the entirety of the logic, and we'll paste it in both the left hand and right hand functionality, and we'll just tweak it as we need to. And unfortunately, that means we actually have to paste all this logic as well. This will change in the future when we make the instantiation happen on the weapon itself, not the hand, but for now, this is fine. So what do we need to change here? Well, if we're left-handing it, as I said before, obviously we're going to instantiate the live model on our left hand. And that's it, really. So we'll save that. If not, make sure it instantiates on your right hand. Now, we're going to say over here, we're just going to pass player_manager.is using left hand. And this is on successfully cast spell under the player combat manager. And then up here, under the handle LB action, we're going to say perform magic action. And then we're going to pass the, I'm not sure why I did that. We're going to pass the player inventory manager dot left weapon, because this is an LB action, so it is always your left weapon. And then we're going to say true. And then we're actually going to need to update a couple things in the animator. So let's go over here, and you can see there's a parameter here. It's called mirror, and we can link it to a parameter called is mirrored. So let's do that. Highlight every one of your spells and click parameter on the is mirrored section or mirror section, and just put it to is mirrored. And put simply, that just means if the is mirrored parameter is true, then we're going to mirror the animation. Now, if I go into the game and I throw the spell, as you can see, It is throwing, but it still appears to be instantiating on the right hand. So I guess we messed up something. It starts on the left hand, but it almost cuts to the right. So we're going to fix that. I think we forgot to declare we're using our left hand. So the code looks good. Everything looks fine right here. Okay, so we're not declaring if we're using our left hand or not. So all we can do down here, after we perform the magic action, this is right under the handle LB action for this code right here. We're just going to simply say player animator manager dot animator dot set bool, and then we're going to set is using left hand to true. And that should make it so the effects actually instantiate, the live effects rather, in the left hand and not the right hand, because the warm-up is doing correctly, is instantiating correctly rather, but the fire effect after it becomes live is not. It looks like it's still coming from the right hand. And I put a spelling mistake in that, so that still didn't work. Okay, now. And now if we go into the game and I press the Q button, you can see it actually instantiates from the left hand and fires from the left hand. So now we can actually cast magic with our offhand, which is fantastic. Very, very nice. Functionality works as intended. Okay, now that we can actually do that, and that's a part of our game, let's actually get back to the bow. And as you can see up here, we just have this pseudocode aim the bow. So let's actually make that. Let's go down here and let's make a private void. I'm just going to call it perform LB aiming action. And this is going to be very simple. Since we handle all the heavy lifting with the animator itself, we're just going to basically say player animator manager dot animator dot set bool is aiming is equal to true. Now we're not done because we need a way to stop aiming from the bow. So over in our input handler, let's give LB its own little function. Right now, all the combat inputs are shared on one functionality, but let's make a private void handle LB input because it's going to need a little bit more logic. It's getting a bit more, dense. So first, I want to make a check. You don't want to aim when you're doing certain things. We don't want that. So we're going to say if player manager dot. Then we're going to say if we're in the air, we don't want to be able to aim. Also, we're going to say if player manager dot, let's make it so we can't aim while we're sprinting. We don't want to aim then. And I think that's fine for now. That's the two main ones. Let me just check real quick. And we're going to say if player manager dot is firing a spell. Okay, so let's lock aiming. Then we're going to say LB input is equal to false. And then we're going to return. Okay, so moving on, we want to make sure we're setting our blocking. So I'm just going to change this to an else if, so it's very clear as an indicator of what's happening here. If LB input is equal to false, if blocking collider, actually I think I'm already checking for that. Yes, I am, of course, that's already been done. We've done blocking. So this is all fine. Let's go below this now and let's reset our aiming. So let's just say if player manager dot is aiming, which we don't have made yet, don't worry about that. We're going to say player animator manager dot animator dot set bool is aiming is equal to false. And now let's go over to our character manager base class that the player manager derives from, and let's make a bool, a combat bool for is aiming. Let's put that. I'm just going to put mine right down here next to the is two-handing weapon. Public bool is aiming. And let's update that on the player manager's update functionality. We're going to say is aiming is equal to animator.getBool is aiming. And after this, I think everything should work as intended. We will test it and see. So is aiming is equal to animator.getBool is aiming. Okay, let's save that. Let's minimize everything. Okay, I almost forgot. Go over here to the LB action, sorry, and say perform LB aiming action, or else it won't work. And I think I forgot something else. Yes, over here on the input manager, we actually have to call our handle LB input on our tick input function. Okay, nice and simple. Excellent. Now let's go into the game. Nope, I forgot something again. We want to limit our movement when we're actually aiming the bow. We can only walk while we're aiming the bow, so under handle movement input in the input handler, we're going to say if the player is aiming, we're going to do some logic, else we're going to do some other logic. And if we're aiming, we want to divide our movement input by 2, basically. And that will just limit the speed. This also should be less than or equal to 0.5 over here in the player locomotion manager for walking speed. And then we come back here, actually put this in the wrong place. Make sure you're dividing by 2 if we're aiming, not if we're not aiming. And I think right now that should be good to go. So that should conclude everything. Let's actually go into the game now and save this and test it. So if I clear the console here and start the project, Okay, let's two-hand the bow. And let's press the aiming button, which is just LB. Let's hold it and see what happens. All right, cool. We're aiming and we are locked to a walking speed. That is fantastic. All right, guys, if you did enjoy this episode, don't forget to leave a like and leave a comment. It does genuinely help my series out so much. And if you feel like a super champion, check out my Patreon below. On the next episode, we're going to instantiate an arrow and actually fire it from the bow. So we'll have to make an ammo class type, and we'll have to add a new thing into our player inventory to support the player holding different kinds of ammo. So I will see you guys in the next episode for that.